So this is kind of weird. Here we are in a Zoom format today, but there's some important things we got to discover that we kind of came across when coaching some clients, and a bit of realization we had surrounding breath. And let's dive into that a little bit deeper. Roger, have you ever thought about breath?
No.
Okay. Well, you don't have to actually, because it can just happen. You just breathe. But can we do it better to help our kettlebell training?
Maybe. I wish I had a slideshow to help us out.
All right. Well, um, maybe a slideshow will appear in three, two and a half, two and one.
I got it.
Perfect.
All right. So, the issue that we were dealing with is, we independently recommended breathing for one of our students who wanted to improve his press. And, it made perfect sense to us based on his position, based on where his weaknesses were, but he was a little confused. He's like, I'm a mellow guy, I don't need breathing. What is the point of all this? So we figured we'd spend a few minutes breaking it down and explaining the implications of breath on biomechanics. So the first thing we need to consider is where your lungs are. Okay, they're in your ribs. I know that's very, very simple, but I think we take that for granted. So your ribs, your ribs surround your lungs. Your lungs influence your ribs. Your ribs attach directly to your spine. When your lungs fill or don't fill, they influence your ribs influence your spine. So the quality of your breathing is going to impact the rib cage. Now, why is that relevant? The alignment of your spine and your rib cage is going to influence the scapula. Okay, so if we're going to, we've done another video on that, but we're really getting into glenohumeral rhythm. So for the humerus to move, the glenoid fossa, basically the shoulder blade needs to move up. And the relationship of the shoulder blade on the rib cage is one that is convex and concave. So they're both curved. So imagine like a big spoon, little spoon situation. Okay.
Oh, I can't imagine nothing but big spoon and little spoon.
So imagine the big spoon goes to get into place, and suddenly the little spoon's all flat. Like no spooning is happening. Everyone's super upset. That's what happens when your curved scap is trying to sit on a flat rib cage. So the shape of the rib cage matters. The scap can't glide, and you are really missing some motion in your press, and that's obviously problematic. So what we're really looking to do when we're talking about breathing is getting the diaphragm online. The diaphragm. I'm not going to go into anatomy now because this is going to turn into a 45-minute video, and as much as I'd enjoy it, no one will watch it. So the diaphragm needs to move up and down. It needs to line up with the pelvic diaphragm. In order for that to happen, we need to be able to set the rib cage, the spine. Breathing needs to happen normally for those mechanics to take place. So what we're really looking for is three-dimensional expansion. On a side note, a lot of people are cueing belly breathing, which maybe that has its place when it comes to relaxation. But if your breath is coming through just the front, you're not really going to be lining up both of your diaphragms. And I've got a slide here that's going to kind of help that. So if you look at this, this image on the left, you see that okay?
Yeah, it looks great.
Okay, so we've got the top dome, which represents the abdominal diaphragm, and then we've got this bottom pelvic diaphragm here. These two need to line up. This represents the musculature on the front of the body. This represents the musculature on the back. So all of this basically creates a canister in order to keep good alignment, to keep everything nice and pressurized. We're going to get into pressure in a little bit. What often happens, especially when you get the puffed out trainer posture, is the back side of the body will get compressed, the front side of the body will get lengthened. Okay. Now you can see that the top dome and the bottom dome no longer line up. Okay. There are obviously some issues with that. When they don't line up well, which will happen if you're doing, let's say you're doing belly breathing, right? this position, this belly is already lengthened, and then you're cueing it to lengthen even more. Okay, one, your lungs are not in your belly; they're in your they're in your rib cage. So
As
we don't.
mentioned earlier.
uh, so what we're really looking to do is we want to get these diaphragms lined up. If you can't do that, this actually happens. Your spine falls out of your body and bounces off the screen. I've seen it happen like a dozen times.
Whoa,
Yeah, it's a mess.
that seems dangerous.
So what we're really looking for again is just good alignment here between this top diaphragm and this bottom diaphragm. Okay, so the diaphragm attaches directly to the rib cage and the spine. Okay, so like any other muscle, if it's not functioning properly, if it's too short, if it's too long, it's going to have an impact on the bones that surround it. And going back to the press in particular, we need that scap to glide well on the rib cage. So if the diaphragm can't move, the rib cage is out of place. You have shoulders that don't work. You're also going to have hips that don't work all that well too, because the diaphragm, the pelvic diaphragm, is influenced as well in a negative way. But we're mainly focusing on the upper body because we're talking about this in the context of the press. So when the diaphragm can't move up and down properly, it's going to affect any number of the muscles that it attaches to, or that it attaches directly, muscles that attach directly to the spine or that attach directly to the rib cage. And when you really start deconstructing a human being and you start looking at like anatomy videos, which I don't know any weird person who would do that online because that's gross. But all of that stuff just kind of blends together. So it really is, when you influence the diaphragm, you're influencing the psoas, the transversus abdominis. It's like one big chunk. Okay. So we need to have those two diaphragms aligned well. And again, if you've got that puffed out chest, or if you're breathing through your belly, or if you're breathing too high in your chest, if you don't have that if you don't have that canister closed and you don't have that 3D breath, you're going to get some muscular changes or some bony changes or both. Okay. So the muscles that will attach to, let's say the scap is now out of position because the rib cage is out of position. The shoulder muscles and the scapular muscles that attach are going to have altered relationships. They're going to change. I think a simple way to put it is they're going to be preoccupied with really just trying to keep they're going to be preoccupied with trying to keep the scaps attached to your rib cage because they don't have a really good connection. It's the scapulothoracic joint is what they call a false joint. Okay, it's not like a deep ball and socket joint like the hip. Okay, the scapula attaches here; it doesn't attach to the back. So the muscles really have a lot of work to do to keep it lined up. And again, when you can't breathe well, those muscles change. They're really just fighting to keep things attached. Your arms are your humeri are going to potentially reorient, and that's going to be problematic. Okay, same thing obviously with the pelvic diaphragm. They will influence the pelvis, the femurs as well. So when we're really looking at mobility work, which is what a lot of people will prescribe, it's going to be less effective if you don't have that canister, if you don't have it sealed up, because again, this is all connected here. So as the two diaphragms are not lined up, you're going to get muscle changes because the muscles are trying to keep things basically from falling off of your body or trying to keep you in balance. People are going to go in and try to mobilize those things. Probably not going to be terribly effective because they're not choosing to be tight or restricted. They're really just dealing with the fact that you're not breathing well and that your diaphragms are not lined up. Okay, so what we want to do, rather than doing a bunch of direct stretching, is we really just want to put those diaphragms in line. We want to do some breathing and really just kind of let the cyclical nature of breathing do the work, bringing air around in the rib cage, in the pelvis. So the body then has the ability to kind of get back to its normal set point, rather than being in what we would call a compensated position.
Got it. So it's kind of like doing diaphragm curls. Is that what you mean?
Yeah, basically, or
Yeah, that
diaphragm push-ups,
yeah, chicks
or
dig that stuff.
yeah.
Yeah. All right. So at least I know what I'm going to do in front of the mirror later. Some diaphragm push-ups.
Well,
Or okay.
obviously.
All right. Sweet.
So the next thing we need to think about is with the press, once we get everything working well, and now we've got scaps that glide, now we have abdominal muscles that work well that can actually support the pressure that we're going to be putting, especially when we go to press heavy. There's a lot of pressure coming down, so we need to be able to put pressure up so these two forces can meet and oppose one another. Okay, so pressure is going to be really important. A lot of people have talked about power breathing or about the Valsalva maneuver. Really, what you're doing is you're pressurizing that canister. But if you have let's call it a leak, that's kind of a common fitness word, a leak in the canister, your air is not going to be where you want it to be. It's not, these two things are not going to oppose well, and you're going to be missing out on a lot of pressure. So ideally, we want the pressure to be as high as possible if you're going to meet a really heavy press. So we want to make sure that your body is in a place to handle the pressure. And again, if you're not lined up, when you're going to pressurize, that's all that's coming out of the front. Okay, it's almost like blown out the front. Your abdominals are going to be weaker than they could be, so you're probably leaving some strength on the table. Okay, so really important, really important that we have a stable base to push against, and the pressure that the two diaphragms will create in in that space is important. So if you think of, rather than thinking of the muscles as the pressure, which a lot of people do, or the tension, think of your muscles and your bones as the container. Okay, when you have that container set and it's nice and solid and nice and tight, when you breathe in, it's going to be better able to accommodate. It's going to be better able to accommodate that pressure.
So in regards to that, then would you want to consider like generating that pressure with the diaphragm and then moving outwards and then having those musculatures kind of contract more? Is that way you would look at it? Because I know like sometimes the common thing is to tighten those abs and those type of things. But if you're not lined up, it's not necessarily going to be as beneficial, obviously. But could you start with like taking that deep breath and having your canister lined up and then contracting the abs? Is that a method to go, or am I totally derailing?
Um, I think as long as you're, what you need to do is think about, can you get your canister lined up? Okay, can you get the top part, which is the rib cage and the abdominal diaphragm, with the bottom part, which is the pelvis and the pelvic diaphragm? Can you get them lined up? Okay, once you do that, you need to ask yourself the question: is are the muscles able to now support the pressure that you're generating? Okay, when people will do a lot of breathing, and usually what actually sets things in place is a really good exhale. Okay, exhaling tends to bring that back together. When people exhale and things are suddenly lined up, they will often feel their abdominal muscles fire a lot more, especially if people have that puffed out posture. Um, they'll feel all kinds of things going crazy in the front and the back. So once you get those two canisters lined up, and then you can breathe three-dimensionally into that space, then you're going to want to fire the abs in order to just keep the pressure. So whatever sequence works for you, but I think the point that you're really making is you can't just say tighten your core if you're out of position, because if you're out of position, if we go back a couple slides. Oh, there goes the spine again.
Yikes!
If we go back to this slide here, this is the front. This is lengthened, so you can tighten it up, and it might feel tight, just like a rope that you're pulling on is going to feel tight. But that doesn't mean that it's in a really advantageous place to generate tension. This is going to be the advantageous place to generate tension. So even though from this position you're tightening your core, it's not really in a place to do that much. It's not going to be able to stabilize like the picture on the left will. because the relationships between the front and the back. Does that work? Did I get that?
Yeah, I think that's pretty helpful. Thanks.
Don't mention it. Um,
I won't.
so, so we do need to realize, force production is a part of strength. There is a physical reality behind strength. And, you can think about, like an analogy you might think about is running on sand. You can't run very fast. And one of the reasons why you don't run very fast is when your foot's striking concrete, the force of the foot down on the concrete is pushing right back on you. Okay. It's not the force of the concrete, or the surface of the concrete's not yielding. But when you're running on sand and you have a big step down, then suddenly everything's deforming, and the pressure that you're pushing down is not met by the surface underneath it. Okay. The same thing happens with strength. When we go to load something, if the surface underneath that load, so let's say, you're still, working hard to get that 48 kilo press, right? If that press is coming down and it's not supported by your hip, if it's not supported by your midsection, or let's say it's a squishy midsection, then when that force comes down, it's going to be met by a yielding surface. It's not going to be met by more or less equal force. And that's what you need. A lot of people, when they think about pushing, or they think about pressing, they think about pushing up. And a lot of your power is going to be coming from pushing your feet down into the floor in order to withstand the force of the 48 kilo kettlebell coming up, giving the scapula a really solid platform to press from. So, the ideal force production is going to come down to, having good surfaces lined up. You want ideal, whatever that is for an individual anatomical position. Um, you want your muscles to be able to do their job. So if your scapular stabilizers are really just fighting to keep your scaps from falling off your rib cage, okay, probably not going to be able to stabilize them as they upwardly rotate as the arm goes overhead. So they're kind of doing double duty, and they're not going to be able to do two jobs as well as they would one job. And you want muscles to have their ideal length. If you look at where muscles contract best, they tend to contract strongest in the middle. But if you're walking around and they're always short, or they're always long, whatever, they're not going to get a lot of force production. And you're going to have the pressure I talked about with sealing the canister. And the last piece is, you have to think about neurological safety. If you don't feel confident in your shoulders, if your shoulders are kind of beat up, or not feeling all that great because they're not resting well on your rib cage all the time, um, you're not going to feel really strong going overhead. If you approach a press like, oh, I hope this doesn't hurt, you're probably not going to hit that press. Every time I pick up the 48 kilo kettlebell to press it, I know whether it's going to go up or not. I can tell by how heavy it feels, and I can tell by how I feel in the moment. And when I pick that thing up and I know, like, oh yeah, this is going up, I press it every time. But if I don't feel good about it, I don't try, because I know my brain's not ready for it. Maybe I'll come back to it later on in the workout, and usually I do, and usually it works. But I do enough to convince my brain that, I'm nice and safe doing that. But part of that is breath work. Part of that is making sure that, everything's lined up well, so I can have all of the physical elements behind my proper force production.
You know what they say, safety first, Roger.
Yeah, that's really important to me. And I guess the last thing that, I want to talk about is, a lot of people think breathing is bullshit. And, you bring it up to them and they're like, oh, well, I don't need to mellow out, or, this is for yoga, or this is for sissies. Um, this is not a this is not a divergent idea. When you look at the classic, stretch and strengthen model of muscles that people have been using for a long time, like, if your glutes don't fire, um, then stretch out your hip flexors and then do some hip bridges. That usually doesn't work. Um, but that's a side note. But that model is really talking about anatomical position. It's talking about restoring things to their proper position. So if you talk to somebody about, having that posture when they're looking at their cell phone or sitting down too much, or stretch this and strengthen that. It's all the same thing. Breathing is biomechanics. It's not a weird radical idea. It's just the lens through which you view it needs to change. And when I started my breath work, and this was a long time ago, but when I started doing breath work, I put about 100 pounds on my deadlift. And I'm somebody who's already been doing that sort of thing for a long time. It didn't happen overnight, but it happened pretty quickly. And I felt so much stronger, and I didn't have pain anymore, that suddenly I was able to train more, train harder. And that weight just started coming, just started adding onto the bar pretty quickly. So this is not a divergent idea. Again, if you think exercise form matters, if you think that maybe people shouldn't sit too much, this is all the same stuff. It's just another way to look at it.
Excellent. Divergent. Isn't that a movie?
Yeah,
Have you
I
seen
think
it?
so.
Oh,
No,
okay.
probably not.
All right, cool. I haven't seen it either, but this is really good stuff. Is this it? Is this all the stuff we gotta do? Is now just breathe, line up our domes, and go?
That's
Okay,
it.
that's it.
No more slides.
Awesome.
That must be the solution. Look, it's not. I don't want to oversimplify it, because
Stop
the
sharing your
have.
screen real quick.
Huh?
Stop sharing
Oh,
that screen.
okay. I'm sorry.
That's all right. I'm not
There we
mad.
go.
All right, there. That way everybody sees our happy faces together.
Um, I don't want to make it seem like all you have to do is a little bit of breathing, and suddenly your deadlift's going to jump 100 pounds. But what I guess what I the getting breath into certain parts of the rib cage that we neglect. Hey, there's a child behind you. Hopefully it's not armed.
Yeah, she's fine. There's a goat behind you, so it's all
Oh,
getting crazy.
yeah. Um, but I don't want to make it seem like that's all we have to do, and that's not it's super easy. But there really is a lot of power in really just lying down, learning how to line these things up. Often placing your feet on a chair or on a wall will help you line these things up, and really breathing, exhaling until you feel your abs, and then breathing into that closed space, will really make a big difference for a lot of people. But I do recommend that all of our, what are we up to, 11 subscribers? um
It might be at 12 or 13
oh,
now.
well, I
I mean, who
recommend that
knows?
all of
When somebody
those.
watches, we could be at 10,000. So,
Well, I recommend that people really look at their posture. Is their low back, does it feel tight and constricted? Do you feel like you have this kind of puffed out chest? Because if you do, then you could probably benefit from some breathing work. Not in every case, but in a lot of cases.
let's just say somebody like myself could benefit from that breathing work, which is potentially true. How long does one have to do these sort of things? Do I have to do it for like an hour? Can I get away with like 5 minutes, 3 minutes?
Um,
All
you know,
day type of thing.
I'm not gonna get into that. I'm not gonna, this is gotcha journalism. This is fake news, and I'm not gonna talk about
Gotcha. Well, fine. That's fine. We'll move past that.
it.
Anything else about the breathing for today?
Well, something I do want to answer that, and it is that I don't know how long it's going to take. I don't know. It usually, the breathing part doesn't usually take that long, but getting lined up usually does. So you can breathe for an hour in a shitty position. Um, but that doesn't mean that it's going to do anything. But you can maybe breathe for 10 seconds in the proper position, and you get just what you need. It kind of flips that
Got it.
switch. So yeah, there's a lot of variability there. This is a huge topic, that we will go into more and more. But I think this is kind of a good primer to basically say, start exploring breathing. It does have strength
Mm.
implications beyond just holding your breath and turning red.
Yeah, I like that. That's a good summarization right there. Just think about it a little bit more, breathe, get your domes lined up, and do those diaphragm curls. And guess what? You're gonna be setting PRs all over the place, and you might not have so many ouchies. You know?
Yeah, yeah, that's
All
exactly what I was thinking.
right. Okay, good. All right. Well, if that's that, then let's take this time. And if you need to go back and reread those slides, just kind of scroll your thing back. But be sure to sign up at our email address, or Instagram or website, all those stuff. But if you got this, you got this. And make sure you have any questions, just send them our way, and we'll be happy to answer them. And yeah, anything else, Raj?
No, I'm good.
All right. Stay
Me and
strong.
the goat have spoken.
Screw the goat. We're out.